What's up, everybody? Matthew here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. It is getting a little weird out there these days. We're going to talk about dystopias today. Thanks for checking in. If you're new, my name is Matthew, one of the pastors at Gospel Fellowship PCA. We are a Reformed Bible believing church just north of Pittsburgh. If you're looking for a church like that, come check us out. Well, if you're watching on YouTube, let me introduce the guy to my left, my right, your left, I think. This is Christian Jones. Christian Jones is the youth director at our church here, Gospel Fellowship PCA. He's been a pastor, minister, youth leader all around the world for a very long time. And today he's going to come on to join me for this discussion about dystopias. We're going to get into a little bit of discussion about dystopias in general first, and then we're going to talk specifically about one short dystopia that you should definitely read called Harrison Bergeron, which I think I assigned to you for reading. Is that the first time you'd ever heard of it when I told you you had to read that?
Yeah, I had not heard of it before. I don't know if you would necessarily say what you did was assigned to me, but you did suggest it. So
Right. I think my exact words were, "Hurry up and read this so we can do a podcast about it," is what I said.
yeah, I think that's about it. So I guess you could say you assigned it. Yeah,
Right.
I don't remember seeing that in the job description anywhere about podcasting and stuff, but
No,
you know,
no, no. But I'm glad to have you on today because it gives people a little bit of insight into the banter that we have at Gospel Fellowship in the staff. Now, probably some people may know David a little bit because I see him on our church's YouTube channel preaching once a month and some other videos that he's done. But I'm not sure people would know you quite as well, though they certainly should if they're going to attend Gospel Fellowship. You're a major part of the three-prong attack of you, David, and myself. Why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself so they know who you are?
yeah. Christianity Jones, as I'm affectionately called around these parts. I have been in youth ministry, in pastoral ministry I did the math on this yesterday because it was a question in a conference I was just at about
Hmm.
how many years served.
Yeah.
I'm in my 15th year,
Whoa.
which is kind of weird and crazy. So I've been doing it almost most of my life, definitely all of my adult life. And that's all ranged from youth ministry mostly to a couple of years. I did some senior pastoring in a different denomination
Hmm.
and came into the Reformed faith, into the PCA. Love it, and I'm really glad to be here at Gospel Fellowship to get to work with Pastor David O'Leary, and I also get to work with you, and that's
I was going to lead with the question, what is it like to work for the greatest boss in the whole world? But
well, Jill is a
she just
really,
left, right?
really great leader. Really glad to work under her.
Exactly. For those of you that don't know, that's our office administrator who sometimes tells us what has to get done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She keeps us on top of things for sure.
she sure
So
does. That's true.
definitely fulfills her role very well.
That's exactly right. So, what other viewers may not also know is that you and I are neighbors. You kind of
Yes.
creepily moved onto my street and are oddly within viewing distance of my front porch.
Yeah, man, you are a revisionist when it comes to history, my friend. Uh yeah, I bought a house a few doors down from you. I did not know that you lived on that road. My wife and I were living in the city, of course, which you know. Yeah, we were living down in Pittsburgh, which is just a stone's throw away, as you always like to say, and moved out of the city, moved closer to the church, and just so happened to buy a piece of property that was a few doors down from you. So it worked out. I do remember telling you when we were looking at houses and telling you that it was on the road you lived on, and I remember your face lit up like a Christmas tree. It was like a little boy in a candy shop. It
Oh, like
was
I was excited, right?
Yeah, it was a little off-putting. I mean, I was like, "Ooh, man."
Well, it is kind of nice that we can have staff meetings on my front porch. We can sometimes share a cigar, or if you're Baptist, like some Welch's grape juice or something like that. We wouldn't, nothing inappropriate, of course, but
Never.
maybe an adult beverage, maybe a cigar from time to time, because we're Presbyterian and we can. But again, Baptists out there, it's grape juice only for us.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about dystopias today. And have you read a lot of dystopias, Christian? Is that a genre that you're interested in?
I don't. I find interest in that genre, but I honestly have not read a lot. I do remember reading 1984, though I really should reread it because like just kind of living in the day that we live in, I think it's worth a reread. I haven't read it since high school age, so it's time to pull that one out. I definitely am more into the films. I think it makes for a really great film genre, but so yeah, I like them. I don't go pursuing them. I'm currently, in the middle of trying to get my master's done. So I have enough assigned reading that I don't read a whole lot just for fun these days. So
Yeah, that's a whole stage of life where you don't really get to pick a lot of your reading. I remember thinking I cannot wait until I can finally choose some books of my own that I actually want to read. But when you're
yeah.
studying in seminary, I guess we didn't mention that about you off the top, but you are going to RPTS, which I recommend
Yep.
on this channel quite a bit, the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary right there in Pittsburgh. Always recommend that viewers check that out if they're looking for a seminary. How's your experience been going there, by the way?
It's been great. RPTS is a smaller seminary in that the class size is smaller, which allows you to really get to know your professors really, really well. I get to have a personal relationship with my professors, and there have been times, even in the short period I've been in seminary, that uh, I've had some, personal life things that have gone on, and they are oftentimes the first people to email or call or text. So that's really nice, and it also is very that just really helps the learning experience. It's much more personal in that I can go directly to my professor. I oftentimes am encouraged even
Mm-hmm.
to call them on their personal phones. So I mean
Yeah.
that part of the experience is great, and then just seminary in general um, has been really really good for me. And we won't get into where I came from, but I didn't come from the Reformed tradition, so RPTS is a really great, very sound Reformed seminary, and really I could not really want to be anywhere other than there. So I'm really glad to be at RPTS. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you know what? Your background, we will do another podcast on your background sometime because it is very interesting. And I have done a
It
couple of podcasts where I've interviewed people on their background and how it is that they came into Reformed theology. There's two kinds of people in the world: those that are born Presbyterians and they're baptized as a baby and raised as a covenant child. And there's a lot of us who come into the Reformed tradition through one of the side doors. And so your story is particularly interesting given your ministry experience in another denomination. But again, we will set that aside for a different topic. We're talking about dystopias today. Christian, the world is getting pretty strange out there. Let me name off a couple of things that I think are a little dystopic of our times, and then I'll let you chime in and see what you think about that as well. First of all, it seems pretty obvious that we're living in a time in which our entire understanding of the fabric of what it means to be a human is changing rapidly. I'm talking, of course, about gender and sexuality. It is certainly a dystopic time to think about what it means to be male or female. Of course, as Christians, we're grounded in the scriptures. Genesis 1:26, God created them male and female in his own image. So we believe that as Christians, but the rest of the world is getting weird about this. I just saw a tweet just 10 minutes before we started. It was a list of all of the days that we're supposed to celebrate now as part of our regular calendar. We've got Pride Month, and we've got Transgender Awareness Day, and we've got this and that coming out day. I mean, there's literally about 60 days on the calendar now that we're supposed to devote to human asexuality, whatever that means. So that would be something that's certainly concerning to me. I know it's concerning to you as a youth director, but also thinking about the war breaking out in multiple places across the globe right now. We have conflict in Russia and Ukraine, which is bad enough, but now, of course, violent conflict spilling out between Israel and Hamas. There's fears of that breaking into a wider global conflict. And you know this is crazy, Christian. I just saw this again on Twitter just a few minutes before I came on. They were showing a digitally generated AI image of a car burning on fire in the middle of the street. It looked like it had been bombed. But the point of the video was that was an AI generated video. It looked so real, and it would be so easy to pull off some kind of mass deception about what's really happening in the war. So with the gender and sexuality thing and with the war that we're seeing, there's this whole new era of propaganda that we're going to have to live through, especially as AI makes it worse. What are some of the things that you're seeing that would give you some concern?
Yeah, particularly with AI. AI has become it seems like we just started talking about AI very seriously just within this year.
Yeah, just a
Um,
couple months
and
ago.
yeah, and it's gotten really, I mean, just the way it's progressed has been super, super fast. And it's almost impossible to keep up with as just a normal everyday person walking around, even, that's, on the smarter side of the spectrum, I would say. But it's really hard to keep up with. And in fact, I have even noticed with the Israel Hamas conflict that there have been several stories that have come out via Twitter and even news reporting on some very similar stuff about AI, with the use of it on the part of Hamas so as to, uh, produce more propaganda, to create more confusion. But
Mm-hmm.
even just the utilage of the algorithm that they have got quite a tech team, because they are early on, the videos that they were releasing were immediately getting marked or flagged as disinformation or misinformation, because of the way that they were creating their videos. They were putting attachments to them that basically made the video, like the digital information of the video is from an earlier date. And so
Right.
they were posting it, and it was video footage or photography from current events. But because of the way they were writing all the digital information, it was sneaking past the algorithm, and it was having all of the fact checkers flag all of it. Excuse me. Yeah, flagging it,
Yeah.
saying that it was misinformation when it was really true. So there's just so much confusion just within the digital space. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably, as a consumer of digital media, that's probably the most concerning. And it also makes it just difficult to kind of parse through everything and know what's true and what's not. And I really appreciated, like, even you, I think it was this morning, released the video on your thoughts of the Israel Hamas conflict. I think, especially as Christians, like, it would be really wise for us to sit back and wait for a moment. Like I was saying, you didn't post anything about it moments later or even days after, but it was many days after. So I think that's
About
something we
10
have to
days
be
later.
mindful of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to, I
Um,
did post that a couple days ago from the day that we're recording here today, but I did want to wait about 10 days or so before I had any kind of public reaction to that. But the New York Times just got caught with kind of old school propaganda. It didn't really take a lot of technology to do this, but their leading headline about that hospital that was bombed showed a picture of just a different building entirely. And so they lead
yeah.
with one headline about the bombing of this hospital. We're still trying to figure out exactly what happened there. But
Yeah.
then they sneakily show a picture of a different destroyed building, which is not even the same location. And of course, they don't alert the reader of what they've done there. So that doesn't even take a lot of technology to do that. That's just kind of like journal craft of
Yeah.
deception, just trying to deceive the reader to thinking that they're looking at one thing, whereas they're actually seeing something else. And then twice recently, people have gotten fooled by actual video game footage related to helicopters and jets being shot down and things like that. I remember that happened when the Ukraine war just started. There was all these crazy rumors about the ghost of Odessa or whatever it was,
Okay.
videos that purported to be one jet shooting down another, or somebody shooting down a helicopter from a ground rocket launch or something. Turns out sometimes those clips were actually video games, because the video games are
Oh,
so good. People were uploading them and saying that they had recorded something, and in fact, it's nothing of the like. Have you seen anything like that?
I haven't. I cut my Kirsty, my wife. We cut our cable probably 4 or 5 months ago, and it's been one of the most freeing things we've ever done. We did it for financial reasons. We just sort of, like, we weren't watching a lot, but
Yeah.
since having done it, we have a much brighter outlook on life in general. So,
Well, that's good.
but yeah, I mean, I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, I don't play a lot of video games, but it's easy. I remember playing a hockey video game at my in-laws' house one time. My mother-in-law walks in and thought I was watching a real
Oh yeah,
life
yeah, right.
game, and so it's very plausible. But I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many things, even going beyond that. Just the it seems like as a society, we've lost a lot of just unifying identity. Like we're so divided, and a lot of it is coming from those news sources and things like that. But just the world philosophy of human beings, like what is a woman, and these things are continuing. These conversations are continuing to get not really come to a solution, but rather dive deeper into insanity. Really.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's think a little bit about the dystopia genre as literature. Now, I've tried to read most of the main dystopias. And so, if the viewer is kind of interested, there's kind of five, I think, that are the key ones. So, they would be as follows. 1984 by George Orwell is probably the standard. I mean, that's kind of the best dystopia, I think, in my view, that's been written. George Orwell also has Animal Farm, which is much easier and shorter to read. It's a much more transparent parable of what a dystopic society would look like. Brave New World, I just finished on audiobook. I listened to that again. I had a request from a parent for some feedback on that book and its appropriateness for age level. And so I thought, man, I can't, I think I remember the book from high school, but I better go back and listen to it again. So I did that. Lord of the Flies is a dystopia that I've greatly enjoyed, and then Fahrenheit 451. That would kind of round out the five main dystopias that are the classic dystopias. Now there's some more common, more contemporary ones like The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. But if we're looking for kind of like the hallmarks of the genre, I would say, and I'm going to ask you about film here in just a minute, Christian, so load up an answer on dystopic movies. I would say, though, that probably the hallmarks of a dystopia are one, kind of a futuristic scenario. So it's usually describing some time in the future, somewhat far off, but not unrealistically far off future. Two, definitely themes of government overreach, the government overlords. In 1984, of course, it's called Big Brother. 1984 just kind of writes the playbook, I think, for what a dystopia looks like. There is references to advance in technology, which of course has us concerned today because that's why we seem to be living in a dystopia. There is the hidden wisdom of the past, which seems to come up again and again too, especially in a book like Fahrenheit 451, where the purpose is the destruction of books and knowledge from prior generations. You also see that same theme in Brave New World, where only certain people have access to any real books. And one of the main characters, he's read Shakespeare, and he's read, I think it was a technical manual of some kind related to the human genome or something like that. But he's one of the only people that's read a book. And then probably the last hallmark would be the dumb citizen. There's just kind of this ethos of ill-informed, underinformed citizenry who are under the oppressive thumb of that overpowerful government. And usually they're just totally blind to their own ignorance. They're not even aware of how ignorant they are. Now, those hallmarks are not confined only to books, though. There are certain dystopic movies that have been really interesting as well. Christian, can you think of any movies that you've seen that would kind of fit the bill?
Yeah. Well, one movie off the top is Harrison Bergeron. It's they actually did a film uh in the 80s with Sean Astin, Rudy of all people,
That's
who
right,
plays the main
Rudy.
character. Now the movie like
Samwise
differs.
Gamgee, my friend.
Yeah, Samwise Gamgee. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna go with Samwise. You can't go wrong, Samwise or Rudy. Um, but yeah, they did a movie. It's really nothing like the short story, but it of course has all those elements and it has some similarities and took a lot of liberties. It was really not very good.
No, it's
You
not.
can find it on YouTube,
Yep.
but also think of was it The Road? I don't remember. Maybe you've seen it with Viggo Mortensen. Was a good one. A dystopian. It's a man and his son, kind of working their way through the world in this post-apocalyptic and somewhat dystopian world.
Hmm.
Um, uh, the Hunger Games and Divergent, I think, are probably of the
Yes.
movies probably the most well known, especially amongst like younger audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what's funny is Hunger Games, of course, is probably the most well known of the two. Um, there's quite a few memes out there in relationship to the world of Hunger Games and some of our modern world events or current world events. So some interesting concepts there. And to think, I think the Matrix is probably the like
Yes,
I love the Matrix movies. I think
me too.
uh, even within I don't want to necessarily say Christian circles, but within some quote unquote Christian circles, there's lots of guys. I have a friend of mine. He's probably spent a little bit too much time in the sun, but talks a lot about a matrix and talking about some of the spiritual elements to that. So the matrix is open to be interpreted in any number of ways, but it's definitely in that genre of dystopia. I mean, they've got
For sure.
this overlord
Yep.
and this system of power that so I mean it has all those elements
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, The Matrix is a good one. Only the first one, though. I think two and three are stupid. I have not. I can't even remember what happens. I remember there's some stupid rave scene or something like that. They're dancing or whatever. I'm
Yeah,
like, what is this? This is.
yeah,
It's the good. The
yeah.
first one is the good one, man.
The first one is the best. I didn't like. I just recently, Kirsty hadn't seen these. My wife, she hadn't seen these, and so we recently went back and watched these.
Okay.
And it was not long after the new one, the fourth one just recently came out, and she said, "Are we going to watch this?" I said, "No, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole."
I didn't even know there was
So
a fourth one. Yeah.
yeah, it was poorly received by fans and
Okay.
highly raved by critics. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we have
yeah.
to talk about Book of Eli too. That's a really good one. Have you seen
Oh
that?
yeah. Yeah, that's a really good one with a really great plot twist that I won't spoil. So I'll let
No.
you do that,
No, but you know what? That one fits the bill though, because
Yeah.
though I don't really recall an over oppressive governmental structure, it's more like just the chaos of disintegration of
Yeah.
society. But you
Hmm.
certainly have that oppression of knowledge, or that the removal of all knowledge kind of a motif there. And again, we don't want to
Yeah.
ruin that one for you. If you, the movie's 20 years old though, I guess. So if you haven't seen it by
Is
now,
it?
like, is a 20-year-old
Golly.
spoiler alert, or 15 or something like that. So I guess
Well,
probably people have seen it.
yeah. That's a really good one.
Minority
Can't go
Report
wrong with
too, the
Denzel.
idea
Man.
in I'm sorry, in Minority Report, the idea that you could commit a thought crime, you could be convicted of a crime that you've only thought about or contemplated. That's a theme from
Yeah.
1984, the idea of a pre-crime or a thought crime, that you think something in your mind or in your heart and the government arrests you for that. Well, Christian, let's go ahead and get into Harrison Bergeron, which is a favorite of mine. I wish more people were aware of it. I've kind of been on a mini crusade to get people to read it. I even have a Harrison Bergeron t-shirt, which foolishly I did not wear today. I wish I had it, because that's my best T-shirt that I have. It's a very cool T-shirt,
Hmm. Missed
but it's by
opportunities.
Kurt Vonnegut in 1961, and it's a short story. How long would you say it takes somebody just to read it?
I mean, if you're 10 minutes, maybe.
Yeah,
If you're
it's not
if you're
long.
it's not long. If you want to sit down and like I went back and reread it just with a highlighter and a pencil just to kind of hit some high notes to get ready for this. But I mean, even that only took maybe 20 or 30 minutes,
Yeah,
just really slowly reading. So
please, if you're out there and you're listening to this podcast, maybe you just like watching YouTube and you like taking in audio media as your primary means of information. That's fine. In fact, I'm glad. But if you want to read something that will only take you let's say 15 minutes max to read Harrison Bergeron, I promise you will probably be blessed by it. Now, I'm going to tell you this: it's not a Christian story. It does not intend to be a Christian story. Not many of these dystopias that we've referenced intend to have overtly Christian motifs to them. So if you're looking for something of a spiritual nature, go read A.W. Tozer or something like that. But dystopias are helpful because they expose some of the weaknesses in our fabric of society. It exposes some of the ways that maybe you're being manipulated or taken advantage of, and you're not even aware of that. You know, Christian, one of the themes of a good dystopia is that there's at least one character who awakens to the fact that they are missing 90% of the information that would be relevant to understanding the world around them. There's usually that character who, at least it dawns upon him that he doesn't know what he should know, and he tries to break forth into some kind of freedom. He tries to rebel against whatever oppressive forces there are, and he may or may not be successful in that rebellion, but usually there's kind of one character who has this dawning realization. In this case, it's the lead character. Harrison Bergeron. So let's set up the context here, Christian, and I'll let you take it in just a moment here to kind of describe in your own words the society. But the opening line of the short story, again by Kurt Vonnegut, is the year was 2081 and everybody was finally equal. So this is a story. It's a parable about a much discussed buzzword in today's society, and that word is equity or equality. Now, can you kind of fill in the picture for us? Tell us what steps have been taken by society in order to level the playing field, as the Marxists like to say. What have they done to try to make everybody equal in Harrison Bergeron's world?
Well, one of the things that they do is they have created this new branch of government or this new arm of the government called the handicap or handicapper general,
Right.
which I will say this about the short story. There was not a lot of creativity to come up with some of the names, but it definitely gets the point across.
Yeah.
But so they do that, and they've made hundreds of amendments to the U.S. Constitution. We have 27 currently,
Mm-hmm.
27 amendments. They have reached into the 200s, and
Mm-hmm.
so they've added tons of laws, and they use devices to handicap people. So one of the main devices they use is a small piece that they put in the ear that every few seconds it will let out some awful sound. It's sort of like just this constant repeating sound, and it's never the same. It changes, and they also will cover people's faces if they're too beautiful, if you have beauty privilege. And they also will tie like these mesh bags and they fill them with birdshot basically to weigh you down if you're somebody who has some sort of physical strength. So, and basically what they're doing, and you kind of get the idea, is that they're still like constantly coming up with new ways to handicap people to make people even. So in this world, you can't have an unfair advantage, whether it's or let me put it this way: you can't be privileged in any way. You can't have brain privilege or beauty privilege or physical privilege. Everybody has to be the same, and they've done it. They've accomplished this through legislation and by practical, physical means.
Yeah, imposition of difficulty. So the key idea there is that in order to establish true equity, it would be impossible to do that by trying to raise up the low to a standard of excellence, but rather you have to take the excellent and cut them down to the standard of mediocrity.
Yeah.
And that only makes sense because if you have a person who's particularly slow, you cannot make that person any faster. However, if you have somebody who's very fast, then you can obviously add physical encumbrances to slow them down. And so the same thing is true with physical beauty or intelligence. And those are probably the three main areas that they discuss would be beauty, strength, and intelligence. And that leads us into some of the main characters in the story. Now, because it's a short story, there's only a few characters that are actually developed at any kind of length or depth. And so two of them would be Harrison Bergeron, who we're going to talk about him in just a second, put him on pause. He's the title character. Let's first talk about his mother and his father. So we have Hazel Bergeron and we have George Bergeron. Can you give us a little bit, Christian, about the particular handicaps that each one of them has?
Yeah. So we'll start with Hazel, the mother, who in my opinion, and we'll have some disagreements, I think, on the interpretation of this short story. In my opinion, she is the main character. But Hazel is someone who is she comes out into the world, she's equal. So she has no handicap. She doesn't have the handicap in the ear or the birdshot hanging from her neck. She's not somebody that's particularly beautiful. She's very plain and she's level. She's the lowest common denominator, I guess, if you could put it that way,
Right.
when it comes to equality. Whereas George, on the other hand, Harrison's father is somebody who has brain privilege, as I said earlier. So he does have an earpiece, and he also carries with him a great deal of weight with some of that birdshot hanging around his neck. And so you have this couple who are equal by that alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get into the story, you immediately notice that Harrison's dad in the story is constantly burdened by the buckshot or the birdshot or whatever it is that's hanging around his neck and the piece in his ear. You're constantly being reminded of that because whenever the sound goes off in George's ear, he winces, or
Mm-hmm.
you're hearing the narrative from his perspective, and it's like he could be in the middle of a thought and it just stops because of this loud noise that he describes it sometimes as the breaking of milk bottles or something like that.
Yeah, or
So
gunshots or a ball peen hammer or
yeah, it's
smashing bricks
really
or
strong.
whatever it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. So George's father would seem to be a rather gifted individual because he has two handicaps at least. He has the handicap related to strength, and then he has a handicap related to intelligence. And again, those sounds in his ear prevent him from having any sort of protracted thought. So if he's trying to run through some kind of a logical algorithm on anything, whether it would be mathematics or whether it would be current events or whether it would just be thinking about his own personal life or his relationships, any line of thought is constantly interrupted by these smashing sounds that just racks his brain. So his mom is sort of the standard of mediocrity that the government really loves. There's no reason to handicap a person who's already mediocre in every possible area. And she comes off as kind of the dumb citizen that is pretty standard in the genre of dystopia. I think also of the wife of the main character in Fahrenheit 451, and she's very similar to Hazel because I'm not sure if you've read that one, but in that one there's screens all over the room, and the wife of the main character, her name escapes me right now, she's more interested in the characters, the soap operas that she's watching all the time, that she has no ability to process the realities of life, its meaning, its joys, its sufferings, etc. Okay, so we open up with Hazel and George. Now there's Diana Moon Glampers, who's the handicapper general. Any thoughts on her as a character?
We don't really see a whole lot of her until really the end of the short story or near the end of the short story. But one thing that we do actually like when we first really hear about her is from Helen. Helen is talking about, she's thinking of, oh man, what it would be like to be the handicapper general.
Oh, Hazel. You mean Hazel? Yeah,
Yeah, Hazel. Yeah,
yeah.
she thinks fondly of that position and thinks that she would be really good at that, and so uh, she thinks that she would do a good job, doing the role that Diana Glampers does. But all we really get to see of her in the story is she is the force. She is the authority figure that is making sure that all of these things, that everyone is equal. And as you get to the end of the story, you see how far that she and the handicap arm of the branch of the government will go to make sure and keep everybody equal.
Yeah, we talked about her name a while back, what that meant. Diana Moon Glampers, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Glampers?
glampers. Yeah.
Yeah. We were thinking about the fact that Diana is the name of a goddess, and the moon is that celestial object which has no light in and of itself but only reflects. I'm not sure what else Kurt Vonnegut would have written into that name, if anything, but it's certainly kind of a strange name, and it does make me wonder how exactly he came up with that. There may be some background there that I'm not familiar with. How about Harrison Bergeron himself? He is at least the namesake. Now, you said you think that Hazel is the main character. I think Harrison is the main character, but I think an argument could be made either way. What do we know about Harrison Bergeron?
So Harrison in the story is a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
He is is very bright intellectually. He's considered to be a bit of a genius.
Mm-hmm.
He's also very athletic, and also very handsome, very good looking, because he has all of those handicaps placed on him. And as you read in the story, a significant amount of each one. Like even so, his intelligence is so great that the little earpiece doesn't control or contain him. He somehow pushes past that, the sounds that they keep playing in his ear. So
Yeah.
instead of a small little earpiece, they give him massive headphones.
Right.
So think of like a pair of like Bose headphones, noise canceling. He can't hear
Yeah.
anything outside, and the noise is hopefully, or on in their, from their perspective, hopefully stopping his thought. And he is weighed down with hundreds of pounds of handicap because of his physical strength, and his entire face is basically covered up, and they even make him wear this like little red clown nose
Yeah.
to try to, you know, make him look hideous or clownish. And so he is a massive threat. And we find that when we get into the story, he has been uh, uh, taken by the handicapper general in the government and basically put under arrest.
Yeah.
They claim that he's having thoughts of overthrowing the government, and he's made out to be this huge threat, not only to the government but to anybody. So yeah, he's seen as a physical threat by the government.
Yeah, he's sort of the government's worst nightmare because he has every possible advantage. And so, a person who is truly excellent, a person who's truly outstanding, would be seen as, again, that ultimate threat for the sake of the government, whose eventual goal, of course, is just total control. So dumb and stupid and ugly people are rather easy for the government to control, but those people who have any kind of real excellence or skill or beauty to them, those are the ones that are perceived to be a threat. It is interesting. Did you catch the line in there? I'm sure you did, about him being 14 years old but 7 feet tall.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, the thing about him being 7 feet tall and being this massive specimen
Yeah,
is also pretty striking. Again, he's only 14.
right.
Um, and so yeah, I mean, he's just massive, in incredibly strong and athletic. And so, I mean, that type of figure would most definitely be opposing, especially to a people who are basically coward and cowering in fear because of what their government is telling them. So
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Well, I guess there's another main character that we haven't discussed yet, and it's been a minute since I read the story. I forget if the ballerina is ever given a name. I don't think she is given a name,
No,
but
she's referred to at one point as the Empress.
the
Uh,
Empress, that's right, because
yeah.
Bert Harrison calls himself the Emperor. So let's get into the plot. Now, again, it's a
Yep.
15-minute read, so you could march through this in no time. So it begins with Hazel and George sitting on the couch. They're talking about things. Sounds and sirens keep going off in George's ears. Hazel is just kind of a dimwit throughout. There's an alert then that comes across the television screen, and the nation is alerted to the fact that Harrison Bergeron has broken out of the prison. And in somewhat of a great irony, where does he go? He actually goes to the news studio. So much of the major events in this short story take place in what looks to be something like a TV newsroom. And so even as the stuttering announcer is trying to get through the announcements, because remember, even to be erudite or to be a person who's eloquent in their speech is an unfair advantage. So you have to throw a person up there who has a natural stutter, who can't actually perform that task. He is cut off in mid broadcast by Harrison Bergeron himself, who he bursts onto the scene. And heretofore, they had been watching this kind of very mediocre performance of ballet. And the reason that it's such a mediocre performance is that all of the ballerinas, who would otherwise be competent, strong, and beautiful, they themselves are, of course, held down by great burdens. Their faces are disfigured. They're not able to use their true beauty because that would be seen as performatively unfair. And so, in the great moment of the plots, Harrison Bergeron, he demands that one of the ballerinas unmask herself and come to him. He takes his wife, 14-year-old, 7 foot tall Harrison Bergeron, and he and the ballerina have this beautiful dance. And do you remember what happens at that point, Christian?
Yeah. So in the story, Harrison and this ballerina, the emperor and the empress, are not only defying the law and government, but are in the story defying physics. They're defying the laws that govern our universe,
Yeah,
and they become lightened because of the tearing off of their handicaps, both the weights around their shoulders or necks, and then the mask off of their face and their earpieces. At one point, Harrison yanks the earpiece out of the ballerina's ear, and they become immediately light on their feet
yeah,
and float with every new step. They float higher and higher. They're only inches away from the top of this 35-foot ceiling, and they have this long passionate kiss, and it's this really beautiful sight.
Yeah.
And here's where my interpretation would probably differ from yours. But maybe we'll get into that in just a minute. But yeah, so that's what's happening. They're free and light and floating in the air before things take a turn.
Yeah, so, and we'll go ahead and go into that because the book's been out since 61, so I think we can go ahead and break the news. So what happens then is that even as they're having this romantic moment, true love is being experienced. Harrison Bergeron then at some point says the famous line, which I think is the most poignant line in the whole book. He says, basically, I am the emperor. Everybody must do as I say. He has essentially overthrown the government by this seditious act of freedom. And then he says, now watch me become what I can become. And that is kind of the haunting line that resonates in the ears of the listener. Now watch me become what I can become. He's thrown off all the restraints. And just then, Diana Moon Glampers comes in and with a double-barreled shotgun takes them both out. She slays them in midair, and the hero and the heroine collapse onto the stage floor. And that's pretty much the end, except for there's some resolution to the plot, which takes place back again with the conversation between George and Hazel. And Christian, not to put you on the spot, but do you remember any of that final conversation between George and Hazel?
Yeah, so there's basically this media blackout after this happens because Glampers looks to everybody in the studio, particularly the musicians, because Harrison had instructed them to play music, and it's pretty interesting when you read it. You know, that whole exchange between Harrison and the musicians. But as soon as Glampers has shot down Harrison and the ballerina, she then takes the gun and points it to the musicians and says to stop,
Hmm.
and basically around the entire room. And so all that is apparently televised, and then it just goes dark.
Yeah.
And we're immediately kind of thrust back into the living room of Helen and George.
Hazel.
And I failed to mention this earlier. Part of Helen's natural handicap
Hazel.
is that she's unable to sustain any like long-term memory.
Yeah.
She can only really be present for like short bursts, and it's almost kind of like a Dory in Finding Nemo, where she just cannot remember. And so she's immediately saddened, and she's looking for her husband. She's looking for George, and he's walked away to go get a beer out of the fridge. And George comes back and says, "Hey, you look sad. What's wrong?" And she says, "I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm just sad."
Yeah.
And then George says to her, "Well, don't be sad. It's not nice. It's not good to be sad." And so she
Hmm.
kind of brightens up again with still with tears in her eyes. And it's almost like a reset back to the very beginning of the story. We see both of them sitting down,
Yep.
having a conversation regarding what's going on in the television. So
Yeah.
it's almost like it goes right back to the beginning,
Hmm.
almost as though nothing had happened.
Exactly. So she just watched the martyrdom of her own son, the most excellent person that the world has seen, and she doesn't seem to even be aware of the sadness that she's just experienced. She thinks something's sad, but she doesn't even have the wherewithal to process joy or pain or passion or sorrow or beauty. She's been so dumbed down just by her own ineptitude and disinterest in the rest of the world that she doesn't even feel the kind of pain that she should feel. All right, so there's the plot and there are the main characters. Now let's just kind of take a few minutes here towards the end and think about some of the themes that are dystopian that kind of rise to the fore in our own day. So the first thought that I had, Christian, and I'll let you share some as well, is the idea of equity versus equality. And I think this comes across very strongly. This is kind of the catchword of our day today. I'm not sure how Kurt Vonnegut predicted this. Maybe he saw this coming. Interesting, he writes in 1961, so certainly we're thinking about that time of the civil rights movement, though many developments would certainly happen after he penned Harrison Bergeron. But there is a real distinction between equality and equity that I think is lost on a lot of people today. And that is that equality should be conceived of as something like freedom of opportunity. Equality is something like the fairness of the social order, the fairness for every person to advance their own interests, to advance their own self, their own education, their own prospects for making their way through this world without the hindrance of the government imposing it upon them. But equity, I know the words sound the same, but they really do mean something quite different, especially in today's parlance. Equity is the idea that the outcomes themselves must be the same. So rather than just talking in terms of freedom of opportunity, equity says, no, the game actually has to be rigged so that everybody has the same outcome. And that's what true equality would be like. Well, of course, that's really impossible. And let's just talk about finances for just a minute, and then I'll let you riff on another theme that you want to draw out. But let's suppose that the United States government decided that everybody was going to have exactly the same income. Okay, so we're going to cut down the people that make the most because billionaires are bad and millionaires are bad too. And we're going to lift everybody up out of poverty. So let's say everybody makes $100,000. We'll just take that as kind of an arbitrary number. Supposing that we did that, well, we would be equal for about a day because as soon as you gave everybody $100,000, some of those people are going to make very wise investments. They're going to aggressively try to invest their money. They're going to make wise business decisions. They're going to advance their own station in life by way of diligence and stick-to-itiveness and perseverance and wisdom and experience and learning curve. And I guarantee you 24 hours later, you would have some people that blew it on drugs and prostitutes and gambling. And so what would it take to keep people at a state of equity inertia? Well, you'd have to constantly be resetting that deck. Just the laws of economics suggest that some people are going to be foolish with their money and they're going to squander it very quickly and very foolishly, and other people are going to be very wise. So even if we were to establish equity across the board, it wouldn't last for more than a minute because a year later you'd probably be back to something like where you started from, where some people are going to make incredible gains by virtue of we're Presbyterians, so we don't say luck, but we think of in terms of God's providence. But certainly some people are going to do well due to diligence, other people not so much, even perhaps due to misfortune, which we really can't control. Bad things do happen to people all the time. But equity as such really is kind of an idea that doesn't make any real sense in the practical world. The only way you could achieve it is by cutting down the excellent in every possible category of life. Your thoughts, any takeaways from the book?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that all of that is spot on. Just not only that, but it would have to be by force. I mean, and that's really discussed in the story is that equity comes only by force. And my theory of Helen sort of being the main character is kind of rooted in that idea is that she represents the ideal society that, or really the logical conclusion to the idea of equity, right? That she doesn't require a handicap because through years of nature versus nurture, she has been nurtured and basically now embodied the nature of what it is to be equal across the board. And yeah, we see a lot of this even today, especially amongst unfortunately amongst younger people. And this is like one of the reasons that the idea, like I noticed a lot of young people, they don't even know how to think about money because of how our culture and government has really devalued not only the monetary value of the dollar, but also the what it actually does. They've devalued the reality of what money is. And so we kind of cast that idea of money as being something that's merely a piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
and we do this with borders, we do this with morality, we make everything subjective, um, in the name of equality
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
equity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it seeks out the lowest common denominator because that's the only way you can find equality. It's never going to be excellence because it's too high of a bar for some and you know inconceivable by much. So it's the lowest common denominator that you're going to end up resulting into.
Yeah, I was thinking about the concept of beauty too, because beauty certainly works its way into the story in a number of ways, especially with relation to the ballerinas. how today, I don't mean to be mean, but with the transgender movement, we see these biological males who now style themselves as females outwardly,
Mhm.
winning things like beauty contests and such. Just recently, there was a biological male who now identifies as female, who is named one of the world's 100 sexiest people or something like that. And you
Yeah, there's
just
been
kind of
numbers of stories like that.
you
Yeah.
just yeah you just kind of look at that and you're like, does anybody actually believe this?
Right.
And then again, I think it was it in the Netherlands where they had a beauty competition, and it
Yeah.
shows the runner up putting the crown on the transgendered individual's head, and
Yeah.
just, I mean, objectively,
Right.
second place is more
Yeah.
beautiful than first place, and everybody knows it. That's the thing.
Right.
It's like,
And it's not only that, like I even think about, not to cut you off, but I think about even beyond that, like thinking about those that are non-binary, you know, this we have a lot of people who do not identify as one gender or the other, but rather just kind of walk around as this androgynous individual, and they're dressed femme or mass, all these different things. So like even that is just deteriorating the idea of, you know, actual reality, real beauty, and it really even perverts the idea of beauty, too, right? We
mm-hmm,
we have this sort of objective standard of what beautiful is, but we've deteriorated that to a point where no, all things are beautiful, and it's
mm-hmm,
like it's not really true. Like
no,
I may not be hideous, but I wouldn't consider myself beautiful. You know what I mean? Like there is beauty, there's
yeah,
true beauty, and there's beautiful things to be seen even in things that are not outwardly beautiful, but we again into this world of subjectivity and into the world of androgynous being and non-binary, where we're just destroying any standard of good, evil, beautiful, ugly, all these different things.
yeah. Yeah, so in that case, you can't make the ugly person more beautiful. You can't, unfortunately, do that. Now, you could do some things. For instance, you could put braces on somebody's teeth and straighten them up. You could give them a nice haircut or trim their beard, as the case may be. But
Wait, was that
you,
a jab?
you can't. You The only way to really level the playing field is to take the best down, and that's what we see in these beauty contests, where unfortunately the most beautiful person has to be recognized as second or third, or the runner up, just to
Yeah.
make do. How else do we see society restraining the excellent? I was thinking in terms of taxes and regulations. It seems like that's the way the government funds the what do they call it, the handicapper general branch of the government. Has
Yeah.
to be done on the backs of the strong. So the more excellent you are, the more benefit you bring to your community, the more benefit you bring to your family, the more success or wealth you actually gain. The government seems to have to penalize that. As you move upwards in the tax brackets, the government wants to take more from your paycheck. And there's certainly just a ton of frustration, I think, on the part of average citizens like you and me, who probably pay our taxes on time.
Hmm.
We're not rich, but we're certainly not poor. We're very thankful for what God has done in our lives. And yet we see our government taking away our taxes by the billions and by the trillions, and giving it away to foreign wars and international causes that are not our own, defending the borders of other nations while ignoring the porous borders on our own nation. It really is kind of sad, because if it wasn't for the sake of the successful, what could there be to be taken away? And we
Right.
need successful people. This society is built on people who are excellent, and always has been. One of the things that I think the West has done well, and capitalism does especially well, is reward the virtue of diligence and excellence. And unfortunately, when you continue to penalize that at all times, it demotivates people to even try hard. And so we
Yeah.
see a whole generation of slackers. They have no particular calling, they have no particular passion. There's not anything they really want out of life. Kids don't want to get their driver's license. They don't want to go to college. They don't want to ask a pretty girl out on a date. They don't want to take any
Yeah.
risks. They just want to play on their doggone phones all the time and just
Yeah.
have the passivity of mediocrity kind of come over them like a shroud. I guess I'm preaching now, but it
Yeah.
does get me a
Well, I
little
mean,
bit
but
fired
that's
up.
that's the point. I mean, the so in that regard, they're winning. Whoever they are,
Yeah.
they are winning because the idea of getting a population of people who are not driven, who are even confused about the simplest things in life, become dependent. I mean, they eventually inevitably become dependent on the government.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's kind of the point. And so, like I said, in that regard, they're winning. Like what's happening in our society and our culture is a win in their column, whoever they are.
Yeah. Well, I think that maybe this is a good thing that there does seem to be kind of a burgeoning movement, no pun intended, Harrison Bergeron. There's a burgeoning movement of young people, I think, that are really interested in throwing off the restraints of the mediocrity around us. I do see a kind of a call, especially in reformed circles, for
Mm-hmm.
a newfound excellence as fathers. I'm very encouraged by what's happening locally here at Gospel Fellowship. We have a lot of young men that are trying to pursue excellence in their calling, their career fields, men that are talking about being excellent as husbands, which I really commend. You're one of those guys, by the way, a
Thank
person
you.
who's very diligent in caring for his wife. We have a lot of guys that are interested in catechizing their children and being part of a men's ministry. Christian, you and I are part of a men's Bible study that's just flourishing right now. Friday morning, 7 o'clock, so we pack out the whole restaurant. You can't even hear because there's so many tables of men
Yeah.
just discussing scripture and things like that. And I think there's a new zeal for excellence that we're being called to. Maybe I'm just perceiving that, but what's your take? Do you think there's maybe a counter movement happening?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I agree with that. And I think we do see some of that practically. Um, I think particularly within young people like Gen Alpha. We've had the millennials who everybody hated on. I'm one of those millennials. Thank you. And then we had Gen Z. Uh, Gen Z, of course, being older now, which is odd to say. They're older, many of whom have graduated high school or even graduating college at this point. And then we have Gen Alpha, this youngest generation definitely seems to be able to sort of see through the farce of a lot of these different things, seeing through the nonsense of what is or what is not a man or a woman and things like that. And
Yeah.
so there's definitely a shift, but even in this, like the side of religion, like I heard something earlier this week from somebody who is credible, that they in their own research found that like the PCA is one of the is one of, if not the fastest growing denomination in the United States.
Hmm.
And I even think back to the small church that I pastored in Philadelphia coming out of COVID. uh, we were a small church of 4 or 6 people, and quickly within a matter of a short period of months grew into 60 plus people in the pews, and it was just off of just straightforward Bible preaching and teaching. And I think there's a real hunger from people in general for just truth.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that we kind of look at our culture, particularly within the world of politics and our world leadership, and we can see that there's a lot of strings and puppets and all kinds of nonsense that's going on there. And I think that people are just hungry for truth. I think people, particularly with at least within the American context, I think people in general are waking up to the reality that we've kind of been sort of asleep at the wheel for a little while, and we're kind of waking up in the middle of a crash.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's definitely seems to feel that the pendulum is swinging back the other way, ever so subtly. I won't say that for sure. There's a swing back the other way. I think there's a lot that has to take place within our world and culture to kind of solidify that swing of the pendulum the other way. But
Yeah.
I definitely you can definitely feel that there's a likelihood of that taking place.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of in a Chevy Chase movie, like one of the vacation movies or something like that, when he's driving along the car and he's become totally oblivious of the scenario around him and his car's in midair. And let's just hopefully pray that we end up in a soft snowbank or something like that. You remember that
Yeah,
scene when he's driving and he finds himself under that 18 wheeler truck or something like that? But
yeah,
yeah, well,
yeah,
let's leave it on a positive thought that this movement of young people and just kind of resurgence of excellence, especially excellence in the doctrines of grace and a high view of Christ and Scripture, the necessity of the local church, all those kinds of things are going to win the day. We know Christ is King and his kingdom cannot fail. So we're encouraged in that. Christianity Jones, thank you so much for coming on my podcast today. We're definitely going to have you back. We're going to make this a regular feature. Notice, by the way, that our X or Twitter profiles are right there on the screen. They've been there the whole video. Same thing with our Instagrams if you want to follow us. You already know where my channel is because you're watching it right now. Christian, anything that you want to pump, anything that you want to promote, anything you want to hawk or sell or pitch? What do you got for us as we close out?
support your local youth ministries. As a youth director, I feel like I should say that. I am currently working on a new podcast that's kind of be sort of geared that way, called the Reformed Youth Guy Podcast. It's something that I'm been working on for a little while, and there's still a couple things that I need to line up. A lot of conversations with other Reformed youth directors, youth pastors. Um, Plan to have you, Pastor Matthew, come on if you're willing to
Of course,
you
let's
know
go.
talk it up. So just be looking for that. And of course, you can follow me there at my Instagram and on X, formerly known as Twitter. I
Mm-hmm.
don't post a whole lot on either of those, but I do post sometimes. And when the podcast gets going, it'll be much more frequent.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thank you, Christian. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming in. Everybody out there, love you lots. Thanks for checking in. Talk to you later.
Thanks.